it would be more, I don't know, a better answer would have been like, hey, it is kind of a catch-22. We don't want him to get hurt, but at the same time, we need him to win the games. If we don't win the games, we're not going to the playoffs.
Right.
But if we play him 80% of the snaps, we are going to the playoffs, and he's not going to be there for those playoffs.
It's kind
So
of the
it's
same
like,
thing with McCaffrey, right? And
yeah, it's like, oh,
but they're not riding McCaffrey hard. I asked Kyle about that on our conference call. He's like, he disagreed that they were riding him hard, and sure, they didn't ride him as hard as they normally do, but like he still wanted him out there for every single snap coming off an Achilles after saying they wanted to sort of protect him at the start of the year. And I was just, they ride with their star players, and if the wheels fall off, the wheels fall off. It's a little bit Tom Thibodeau-esque, as I'll say as a Knicks fan, where you just, you put it all out there. And the NFL is a shorter season, and it's tougher to get through. But it's like Tom Thibodeau. He'll have these sick regular season teams, and then everyone gets hurt in the playoffs because he's playing these guys 40-something minutes a game. And I don't know that the Niners are necessarily to that point, but they really do ride their star players. And part of that is just a lack of depth at certain positions. I would argue running back, they have a little bit of depth there, and they could take some off McCaffrey. But yeah, with Bosa, they're like, well, if he dies, he dies because we don't have anyone else.
right. I mean, so what's going to happen if they, it's like there's a reason the Warriors are not playing. There's a reason they're a lot deeper this year because they know Steph Curry's 36 and they know that if they play him 45 minutes a night, he'll never see the light of day in the month of May, let alone June when the finals are contested. So they've got this plan to try to nurse him through the season. And you would think the 49ers would have that same kind of plan with their star players like Bosa and McCaffrey, but Shanahan's addicted to McCaffrey and Sorensen's addicted to Bosa, and that's just the way it is. And it's like once those guys go down, it's over.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame him for the most part, but I do think because really with Bosa you don't have many other options. With McCaffrey, I think you do, but like that just goes back to how they set up the roster. They spent a little bit of money on Yetur Gross-Matos and more than a little bit of money on Yetur Gross-Matos and Leonard Floyd, and that was their depth. And they had Javon Hargrave, and Javon Hargrave went down, and they spent a bunch of money on him, probably ill-advised a couple off seasons ago. And so some of these guys that would have helped haven't been around. And now it's all, on Bosa every single snap, and they don't really have an alternative, and they didn't buy one at the trade deadline.
Right. I mean, this is why I got real negative the day after the trade deadline because the Niners had clear needs. They're inside their Super Bowl window. They're $54 million under the cap, and they didn't really get any help. I mean, they got Khalil Davis. All these other contenders added real players. And the 49ers needed real players at wide receiver, at defensive end, possibly at defensive tackle. And they got kind of a stopgap defensive tackle, no defensive end, no wide receiver, no running. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'm not. And some people would spin it like, well, they really believed in their team. And I would counter with, or they really didn't. Right. They didn't add to their team very much at the trade deadline. They either really think that they're awesome, which is probably delusional considering the fact that they're close to 500 and Detroit looks way better than them. Kansas City looks way better than them. But they either think they're really, really good or they don't think they're very good and they didn't want to take invest in this throw any draft capital at this year at all. So what's your guess, Jake? Is your guess that they think they're really good or they think they're really not that good?
My guess is that they were 4-4 and said, we feel 4-4. Like we don't know exactly what we are, and our entire season rests on Christian McCaffrey. They did have a stockpile of picks. They got a bunch of comp picks coming up. They've got picks in rounds 1 through 7. I think they have 2/3, probably 2/4, I think 3/7. So they had options if they wanted to swing. I don't necessarily blame them for not swinging. And clearly the Khalil Davis move was they called around and called around and called around. And then at the last second went, okay, let's get literally anyone. They got it in this just right under the wire for a future 7th. So that was like, we need some sort of depth piece, but we don't feel great about it. Yeah, I think it's something where they're like, well, if McCaffrey doesn't come back and he's not incredible, none of this matters anyway. And so they're treating that as the acquisition that matters. I think at wide receiver, unless you're going to get Kendrick Bourne, to get like a, what is it, a wide receiver 4? I don't think it made a ton of sense to try and make a move there, especially with Pearsall ascending. Defensive end, yeah, I think they're betting on Gross Matos coming back, and they spent that money in the offseason, so that's how they were looking at it. Linebacker's a tough position to try and trade for. I would have loved like Jamie and Sherwood or someone from the Jets, but they probably want to keep him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would have preferred they got like at least a run stopper like Jeremiah Ledbetter from the Titans. I've been talking about this random defensive tackle no one's ever heard of. But yeah, they didn't.
You're the Jeremiah. Did you must have been saying that to Dieter, because that your Jeremiah Ledbetter has led Dieter to throwing a Jeremiah Ledbetter, and that's a lot of Jeremiah Ledbetter.
Yeah. Hey, listen, man, I'm telling you, I thought they needed a gap plug-in, just pure run stuffer, and that is all that man does. He handles double teams, and he's on a bad team, and he's on an expiring contract, and he's not like a young prospect. So I thought it made sense. Maybe they checked it out, maybe they didn't. But yeah, I get them not making a massive move, because if McCaffrey didn't come back and sort of figure out the offense, none of this thing really matters anyway. So. And the way their draft class went, where they hit on almost every pick, it looks like they're like, we got to keep doubling down and build up our reserves with more draft picks.
Yeah, keep your picks, I guess. If you can make something of your picks, keep your picks. Okay, a couple last ones before we bolt for the door. Special teams. It's a train wreck. I was talking to some people in Seattle this week. They're like, hey, Schneider was good here. And I said, well, what the heck? What's going on? Why was he good there? But it's, the special teams down here are ass. And there's only been 2 games that all season where the special teams hasn't gagged on themselves. I'm like, unless Schneider was unless he's like, he must be the world's greatest guy, because otherwise he would have been freaking fired by now, you would think. But they made a couple points. One was that in Seattle, he used starters on special teams. Guys like Brandon Browner and some of these guys played special teams. And maybe that's what the Niners need to do, is play a few more of their starters on special teams. They kind of started doing it last week a little bit with Debo as a return guy, but maybe they ought to use Fred Warner and some of these guys on special teams. If you got all these great players, maybe if you're so bad on special teams that it's killing you and beating you every week, how about use your starters? That's one. The other idea that I have, Kyle Shanahan has said, and I don't know that if I'm the special teams coach, I don't think I would like this at all. In fact, if I was a special teams coach and he said this, I'd be like, we need to have a meeting. He came out and told the media, I don't want to win games on special teams. I just don't want to lose them on special teams.
That's his whole philosophy.
Well, if you're the special teams coach, how does that make you feel? It's like, you don't even care if we win on special teams. You just don't want to lose. That's the most defeatist thinking I think I've ever heard in my entire life.
Listen,
but here's my point, is that if you are going to say that, I don't want to win the game on special teams, I just don't want to lose it, and you have Trent Taylor, who's like the most sure-handed return guy, how do you say that and then use Jacob Cowing, a rookie who's muffed punts, who's fallen down 4 times, who looks like he's going to fumble every time he has it? Why are you using Cowing as a punt returner just because he's a little explosive and taking all those risks when you have Trent Taylor, who's one of the most sure-handed return guys in the league, and he's just walking around your locker room?
Yeah, I would say one with that, Taylor's on the practice squad, and do you really want to bump him up every game? And I honestly think, I don't think Cowing's been that bad. He does seem like he's going to trip over his own feet every time he catches it, and that's a problem. The one that was Luter's fault on that one, but yeah,
but he had a muff too. He had the muff. I forget, it was at Minnesota.
Yeah, I think you're. Yeah, I can't remember, but I think that sounds right. But I think Dieter and I talked about it this week. Like, Kyle's one of his most glaring blind spots is special teams. And like Belichick and Andy Reid and Mike Tomlin, some of the greatest coaches in modern NFL history, have put a premium emphasis on special teams. And Kyle, his whole philosophy is to avoid mistakes there. And yet he also counts on special teams as sort of a default when they're driving downfield and it's any sort of fourth and short. He's like, all right, well, it's a 50-something yard field goal. I'm going to trust that this is good regardless, instead of trusting the offense that he fundamentally has built. And it's this weird thing of like, he doesn't really like special teams, but he expects it to work. But it's not something I feel like he puts a ton of time in. And I'm sure he would disagree with that. But I think compared to some of the great coaches who have spent a lot of time on special teams, I don't think it's something he values, and his answers have historically, I think, supported that. So I think that's a major problem. And I think the core of the problem is dudes, right? Like, because you don't have great depth with your like sixth or seventh, your sixth linebacker and your backup DBs, you just are getting lower production. And because you're not playing like these guys that are your starters, that are the real talent, I think it suffers a lot. And that's the number one thing that I think dictates special teams. And I wouldn't put Fred Warner out there. And I think you probably can't put like Malik Mustafa out there in the same way you would have if he didn't come into his own. But yeah, I don't know if there's a solve for that when you just don't have the dudes on special teams. But if it continues, it's going to bite them.
What about Lowe the Truth? He says, put Pearsall back there.
I would say Pearsall has looked far less sure-handed on punt returns. What I've seen from him in practice,
job.
It's a really tough job. And honestly, I watched Cowing in training camp and practices, and he's looked really, really sure-handed. And listen, he hasn't been the best returner. He had the 30-yarder, I think it was last week. I'm not saying he's the greatest, but I wouldn't switch it up with Pearsall. I think Pearsall's enough on his shoulders as a receiver, and you don't want him having to worry about that and taking a shot as a punt returner when I think he's looked less sure-handed than Cowing has.
A couple rookies who are playing amazing outside of Pooney and Pearsall are Malik Mustafa and Renardo Green. My son put this out, and ML Football kind of copied it. Looks like they kind of copied his. I wonder if they cited their source. We'll have to check. But ML Football says, budding superstar, 49er rookie DB Malik Mustafa has been special this season. Best catch rate in the NFL, 44.9%. Best catch rate over in the NFL, 44.9%. I don't know that stat. Best among all DBs as far as catch rate allowed, 16.7%. Fourth best rating when targeted, 32.6. And he's probably the hardest hitting Niner DB. So that's what you're looking at with Malik Mustafa. Renardo Green has been spectacular. I don't know. Some of these Renardo Green stats are just almost like hard to believe. I mean, Malik Mustafa is a beast, and he's just amazing to watch. But then Renardo Green has also been pretty freaking incredible. Let me see if I can find this Renardo Green stat. But basically, Renardo Green, here it is. He's played 158 snaps, Jake, and he is Pro Football Focus's second highest graded cornerback in the NFL.
Yep.
And he was excellent in his first start as an outside corner. They talked about playing him inside. I talked to him at his locker a month ago. He said, I played man-to-man press corner outside on the boundary, but I can play in the slot. But he's very serious. And it's like, I've been talking to a couple of my buddies. I get some pro personnel friends around the league. And one of my pro personnel buddies called me about 10 days ago and said, dude, Renardo Green is one of the best corners. And I'm like, yeah, I start talking. I'm like, yeah, they've got Luter and they've got, they got Mooney and they've got, no. He goes, no, I'm not talking about on your team. I'm saying Renardo Green is one of the league's best corners. I'm like, really? You really feel that way? And he's like, I absolutely do. This guy doesn't take false steps. His demeanor is the best. His balance is incredible. He says this guy can mirror receivers and he sticks with them. There's no false steps. His hands are really quiet. He says he like when he puts his hands on a receiver, he doesn't seem to draw penalties. He's strong. Like he can. Last week in Tampa,
plays way above his weight.
Yeah, he had a solo tackle on Rashad White, and he threw him to the ground. I don't know if you saw that one.
Such good form. Like the best tackling form I've seen Like Sauce Gardner was like, he can't tackle. Sauce Gardner can't tackle. And you watch Green, and he's going how like coaches coach you fundamentally. And he's just getting guys low and getting them down. Do you mind if I take a little victory lap here
No, please do.
on Mustafa and Green? I'm just going to rewind. I know this is in poor taste to pat myself on the back, but I had Renardo Green going to the Niners in 2 of my 3 mock drafts.
Okay.
I said,
why?
Because I'll just read my blurbs. I said he was another draft favorite of mine, absolute tactician, as well prepared of a corner as there is in this draft, perhaps besides Kamari Lassiter of Georgia. And you're getting someone who should win the starting job opposite Mooney Ward. With Mustafa, I said he's maybe my second favorite safety in this class and seems criminally underrated. And then I said I was fully sold on Ricky Pearsall as an NFL player. I just loved those picks, and I thought Green, technically, his footwork, his attention to detail, his intelligence, and he has he has enough measurables to be able to match up with just about anybody. And then Mustafa's a guy who's kind of raw, but like you saw it on tape that he had the range, he had the physicality, the trigger to get downhill and just blow guys up. And for them to get both of those guys, they're suddenly a team, and lock up Demo. Suddenly they're a team that has like built from the back, with Jair Brown. He's, I don't think, been excellent this year, but there's still a little reason for optimism there.
Yeah. He's really nice. He's a really nice looking player for sure. And he it's so funny because, leading into the draft, I was getting somewhat addicted in the month of March in April last year to the mock draft simulators. Right. Because me, I mean, I go down a mock draft simulator. I mean, that's an hour and a half project right there. So I was playing around with a lot of the different mock draft simulators, and almost across the board, I kept taking Renardo Green. Now, why is that? Because most of those simulators had him graded as a 4th or 5th round draft choice. Yeah. And the highest I saw any of them have him was like second half of the 3rd round. And to me, he was the best corner on the list after about the top of the 2nd round. So I was like, oh, I really want this player. Then when the Niners took him in the 2nd round, almost all of the draft reports were like, good draft for the 49ers, but they reached for Renardo Green because everybody had a 4th and 5th round grade on him. But, that's where it's like, hey, you know what? Don't, go find guys who can play. It doesn't really matter if you draft them in the 2nd round, 3rd round, 4th round. After the top 12 or 15 picks, there's a big drop off anyway. The guys who are picked 16, 17, 18 are often more like 2nd round picks. There's not a huge difference between the guy who goes in the teens or the guy who goes in the 40s sometimes. So, I mean, you know what I'm saying? I just feel like the people get so caught up on like draft value. And it's like, forget about that. Just go find guys who can play. Now, Florida State has had a tremendous run with guys who can play. I mean, Derwin James was good there. He's great in the pros. And there are other guys.
That's what I was going to say.
Florida State's a factory. Yeah.
You look at what has happened to them this year in college. They lost so much talent. Those Florida State guys are absolutely killing it. You look at Verse and Fisk with the Rams.
Those two guys have been great. Verse is like Coleman. One of the strongest defensive ends I think I've ever seen.
He's a monster. They had Keon Coleman, Trey Benson. I mean, they just had so many guys last year, and they have not been able to recover from losing all of them. Tatum Bethune, Johnny Wilson. There's just so many guys that got drafted from their team that
who are playing well.
It's been brutal. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of these guys are playing well. I even like Tatum Bethune, even though he's a step slow. But Wilson, Johnny Wilson, the big receiver, went to Philly, right? Didn't he go to Philly? Florida State's just got dudes, and they got guys on their defensive line this year that are really good. One more I want to share the screen. This was a question I asked Brock today, and I thought this was kind of interesting. I mean, to me, Brock Purdy is 4-0 when he himself doesn't turn it over. And that's this year. And he's 16-0 in his brief career with the Niners when he himself doesn't either fumble it or have an interception. I'm not saying if the Niners have no turnovers. I'm saying if Brock himself doesn't throw a pick or fumble the ball himself, the Niners are 4-0 this year and 16-0, period, over his career. I threw those stats at him today and asked him what he thought of them. Here's what he had to say.
This year, when you don't fumble the ball or throw an interception, I think you're 16-0 since you've been here in those situations. When you hear those numbers, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
I mean, it makes sense. If you win the turnover battle, I forgot what the stat is, but it's, like it's almost an automatic win. And so for me, that's my job, and I take pride in that. In those games where you don't turn the ball over or anything like that, and you're protecting the team, you're protecting the offense, and your defense can then go out and create turnovers, and you can feed off each other. So like that's a huge part of the game, and so it makes sense. That's probably the case with a lot of teams around the league. The quarterbacks that play smart and do their job and put up points without turning the ball over, you're gonna have a really, really high chance of winning. So that's the goal every week.
What do you think, Jake? I mean, it seems almost like, yeah, of course, but 4-0 and 16-0 when you take care of the football, it almost, if I heard that stat and I was him, I'd be like, you know what? I think I might throw maybe 2 or 3 less 50-50 balls this week, knowing that stat in the back of your head. Maybe I won't, just try to put it in harm's way. Maybe one time a game, it might be better if we just punted. I don't know. What do you think when you hear him address it? And when you hear those stats, I mean, they're pretty ridiculous numbers.
Yeah. I mean, it is like, turnovers are, what is it? The number one predictor of wins and losses. But yeah, it is something where this team, I think for the most part, if they don't destroy themselves, they usually win. Now they have a number of ways they like to innovate and destroy themselves, whether it's, missed protections or false starts or other idiotic ways to lose games. But yeah, if I think that's part of the downside with Purdy is he's such a good off-schedule playmaker that sometimes he can get a little high off his own supply. And it's a little bit, I've made the comp before, it's a little bit like prime Russell Wilson, where Russ would buy time, and sometimes it wouldn't go right because he would just play out of the structure too often. And I don't think Purdy's at all like that in terms of how he looks at it. I think he's fundamentally trying to execute the offense in a way that I don't think Russ ever had a full comprehension of, and was sort of addicted to just playmaking. But there is that downside of, when he tries to buy all that time and play make, it can result in, instead of just throwing the ball away, you get a bad interception or you try and fit a ball into a tight window. Like you go to that one Ayuk touchdown, I think it was against Jacksonville last year, where it was like, no. Yes, it's like that Kerr gif, when Curry threw up that thing where he dribbled through like the entire Clippers and then he threw it up and Kerr goes, no. And then he's like, yes. It's a little bit like that with Purdy sometimes, but he's got a lot to think about, as a quarterback. So if I'm him, I think he understands protect the ball, but I don't think you can even stress it even more than that.
2 last questions and we're calling it quits. Give me your key to victory on Sunday. If there's one thing that you say, you know what, outside of the things we've talked about, is there one thing that stands out to you as, man, this has to happen? This is the key to victory against Seattle this week.
Yeah, I would say the obvious one, number one, is like run the ball effectively. But the more crucial one, the one that I've been sort of chewing on, is McDonald, much like many of these really good defensive coordinators, he loves to throw blitzes that are either simulated pressures, but he likes to bring one side, overload one side, and drop the other half into coverage. And he'll drop a nose tackle into coverage, and edge into coverage, and bring other guys. And you might only have like 4 defensive players on 5 offensive linemen, but because of the way he brings them, you'll have 1 unblocked rusher. And that's something the 49ers have struggled with week in and week out. And I think if they're going to win this game comfortably, I think that's something that they need to handle their protections, especially in those situations on third down, much better, and have a better plan, and especially give Purdy a chance where the unblocked rusher is not coming from his blind side. Give him a chance. It might get swatted like it did last week. He had a blitzer right in his face, and it got swatted. It was Antoine Winfield. But at the very least, he's not getting hit from his blind side. I think that's the way the 49ers operate. But I think if they're better about handling their protections, I think that's a key to victory.
I'm going to say Kenneth Walker. I just think it's real clear that, especially you look at that last Ram game, and they came out, they tried to establish Walker. They gave him 25 carries. I think he only had like 80 yards on 25 carries, so he kind of struggled. But I would say it's Walker. He in week 6 against the Niners, he had a 17% target share. They threw him. He caught 8 balls that day. He's got 99 carries so far, Jake, for 398, 4 yards a pop, 6 touchdowns, which is a good number. He's also got 30 receptions for 217 yards. I'm looking at these Niners stats defensively. The Niners allow the 6th most receiving yards in the league to running backs. And to me, I think they're going to do a nice job against Walker, the runner. But Walker, the receiver, especially in the screen game, I think that, to me, he's very quick. He's built low to the ground. He's very explosive. He's hard to tackle. The screen game is all about hustle, desire, so on and so forth. To me, if they can shut down Kenneth Walker rushing and receiving and not let him, have 100 yards, receiving because he's caught 4 screen passes and had all kinds of rack yards. If they can control Kenneth Walker, in the pass game, I think the Niners win, and I think they could win by 14 or 17.
Yeah, I think that's about right. I also think you shut down Walker, you put it on DK Metcalf, who I quite honestly think might be their third best receiver. Like he's their most explosive receiver, but he's also like prone to throwing a fit every single time he plays and doing something stupid and just, not actually playing like a wide receiver. Like he's so physically talented. And also at times you're like, I wish I had anyone else out on the field. He commands attention, but like some of the stuff he does, it must be just exhausting for Seattle fans.
Last question. And somebody was like, hey, where's Dieter? And now we have Dieter's henchman. Somebody called you Dieter's henchman. Yeah, Jake and I are old friends, and we've worked together many times. And Dieter is sick, but I told Dieter a couple weeks ago, hey, I want to get Jake on. And I was hoping to get Jake on with Dieter and have like a kind of a trio, but we do appreciate Jake coming on tonight, especially since Dieter's kid made him sick.
Right.
So Dieter couldn't make it tonight. But here we go. Last question of the night. Give me one or two names of 49er players that you love to watch. Like, they don't have to be the best player on the team. They don't have to be a star player. It could be any player. Just somebody that you're like, you know what? I love watching this guy play. I've got 2 that come to mind that I really love watching play. I'm like, these are guys that, I nerd out and will watch them again and again and again and rewind and rewind. I'll let you go first, though. I don't want to, I'm the host. I want to let you get involved first. So go ahead. What do you think, Jake? Who are the 1 or 2 guys on the team that you're like, man, I love watching these guys play?
I'll give you 2, and they're both on defense.
Okay. I've got Mustafa. 2, and they're both on defense too.
One is Mustafa.
That's one for me too. He's awesome.
And the other one's Fred Warner.
Okay, that's good.
Because just Warner, like being able to see the way the linebacker position has evolved from just like a thumper, and Warner, I talked to him, I going into this season about his aspirations, and he's like, I want to be the best player in the NFL, which like obviously, but like he's a guy that can actually reasonably hold that mantle if he ascends. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is hard to knock off, but like Warner is in that category where it's not an insane thing to say. And the way he just fundamentally dictates the way offenses have to try and attack the 49ers and can also, get down and dirty in the run game, it's just sick. So I'd say Warner, and then Mustafa is just, he moves at a different speed with a level of I'm going to like actually murder you type energy. That's just, without Dre Greenlaw, they need it from somebody, and they're getting it from Mustafa.
Yeah. I mean, Mustafa is just like almost too good to be true. Too good to be true. I mean, smart as hell. Hits like a truck. 4th best passer rating in the entire league when targeted, 32.6. He's been really good. It's not, what I love about Mustafa is you can, like, there are plays where I know it's Mustafa and I don't see the number just because of the thump and because of how fast he's coming up. You know what I mean? This guy shoots the gap. This guy fires himself towards the line of scrimmage. This guy reminds me of Ronnie, or he's not quite the Ronnie hitter, but man, he's close. He's a thumper. He is an absolute. This guy's, and he's smart as heck. Yeah, like if you talk to him in the locker room, he's got really, really good idea of how to play coverage and how to play safety, and he's got. Well coached.
You know who Daniel Bullock's, their safeties coach? I asked him in the offseason. You know who he compared him to?
Who's that?
Bob Sanders.
Who was the Iowa kid, big, thick safety, but he can run.
As a rookie who had not set foot on the field, he compared him to Bob Sanders, former Defensive Player of the Year.
That's amazing. That's impressive. All right, so we both have Mustafa. You have Fred. I am going to share the screen, and I asked Fred, fittingly enough, about the guy that I like watching, and here was Fred answering this, and we got a little highlight above as well. So here we go. This is Fred, and I like Evan Anderson, and I asked.
Oh,
Fred
I knew it. I knew you were going.
Anderson up front, he just seems like he gets better and better every game.
Yeah, man, Evan's just doing a heck of a job, really. Like, you talk about an undrafted free agent coming in, and usually the case is that guys don't really know your name. You just kind of you show up, you go to work, and make a practice squad, and then all of a sudden your name's called to be on the active roster, and has made plays in every single game that he's been up. It's just it's a testament to him, the way that he's worked his confidence and his abilities and being ready for his moment when his number was called.
Yeah, that is my guy, man. Whoa, this kid is great. This kid, I wanted to see the Niners trade for DJ Jones or at least sniff around DJ Jones at the trade deadline. But you know what? The more I watch this kid, I'm like, they don't need DJ Jones. This is DJ Jones. This kid is DJ Jones. He's got the quickness. He's got the strength. He's got the natural anchor. I did an interview with him, and he's like, I've got a natural kind of anchor to me because of the way I'm built. And he's like, he really does. He can, when this guy anchors his feet to the ground, it's like he ain't going anywhere. You're not moving this guy. And then you can see the crazy strength. He splits the double team and throws guys away. On that highlight that we just showed, he's literally jump cutted to his right, and the center tried to pick him off and whiffed completely. And he's in the backfield. The combination of the strength, the quickness, the lower body weight and anchor. You have to be built that way. Not everybody's built that way. This is a 2-gap, strong against the run. Have you noticed that as soon as Hargrave went out and this guy started playing more snaps, their interior run D was quite a bit better?
I still think it's pretty bad, but I'm with you. I think he is like more of a true nose tackle in a way that they have not had in a while. I don't think he's the athlete DJ Jones is, but and I think he's still learning. But I do think in like a year or two, like you get a guy that just can anchor in that way, and you're right, like he's just so stout, and he's got strength that like they don't really have. Like Collins kind of has it, but otherwise they don't have guys that can anchor. Like Jordan Elliott's huge. I don't see him anchor very well. I see him get moved out of gaps a lot. Anderson is just he is tough to move, and I think that's really valuable on a team that needs pretty much exactly what he is.
That's going to do it for us tonight. I do want to play this one last one just because today was a kind of an emotional day for me. Emotional day for a lot of Bay Area sports fans. Tommy Tolbert finished up his radio career. He's been a good friend. He came to KNBR in 1996. I came to KNBR in 1997. And, it's weird. We've, been around each other for so many years. We worked together for 3 years. In a lot of ways, we raised our families at the same time. It was great to go to Hawaii, with KNBR a couple years ago, and we brought our families and they had a chance to meet each other. Here's the final part of Tom's final show on KNBR. Kind of an emotional end to the show.
There have been a lot of people texting me. Mark Spears, Marcus Thompson, No, I love those guys, both of them. Love having them on. They're just so many guys. Like I didn't know Marcus. I didn't know Mark before the show. I mean, I knew him, but I didn't really know him like we know him now. Like get a chance to talk to somebody each and every week. It's just so much fun. You build that connection with everybody, and I'm hoping that came through to everyone that listened for 28 years. Like it wasn't about like the hard hitting questions. And I know I got, every once in a while, Tom, why didn't you ask him this? Why didn't you grill him? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Everybody knows me, knows I don't do that. Like that's just not who I am. I just want to talk with somebody about sports, have a good time, and try to get some answers in my own way. I know sports, played sports at the highest level, and watched sports for 50 years, I guess. My goodness, it goes back a long. I can't imagine how many hours of sports I've watched. I've loved sports my entire life. Like that's kind of who I am, and that's kind of how my day revolves around sports. Like what games on tonight? What are we gonna watch? And it's not just football; it's basketball, it's baseball, it's hockey, even soccer. Recently, like I love the competition that comes with it, and I love the people that come with it. So getting to talk to those people has just been an absolute blast. So, look, I'm not leaving sad. It's been 28 years. How many people get 28 years? Don't you do it? Don't you do it?
No,
God,
I can't, dude.
you.
I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry.
All right, go ahead.
Sorry.
You can go.
I can go.
You can say what you want to say.
I can leave, or I can.
No, you can say what you want to say.
There's not much to say, man. I don't want to be all weird about it. I just, dude. They say like, I'm from here, man, and you talk about being here 28 years. I was 6 years old or something when you started on the air. I don't remember KMBR without you. You think certain teams, you think Warriors, you think Steph Curry, you think Giants, you think Barry Bonds. When people think KMBR, man, they think Tom Tolbert, and they say don't meet your heroes. And I was really, really lucky to get to call one of mine my partner, man. And I'm never gonna have another first one, and I'm really sad that you're going to be gone. I love you, bro.
Love you.
Thanks, man.
Hate you. Take it away, Dirk.
Oh, my God. Oh! Shut it down. Let's go home.
Yep. There you go. An end of an era there. And,
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. I'm not going to get emotional here, but I just wanted to say that Tom's a hell of a guy, and I enjoyed working with him. He's a great guy, and he was a lot of fun to work with. And I just want to thank him for the years that we had a chance to work together, and wish him nothing but great health and great success. And somebody's saying, why is he leaving? He's leaving just because, radio is under siege. And the revenue's just not quite there, and times change, and the whole thing kind of needs a reset. Not KMBR necessarily that show or anything. I just mean kind of the whole industry kind of needs a little bit of a reset. And there's guys from past eras making money that's commensurate with that era of revenue in the industry, and now the revenues have changed dramatically, largely because of podcasts and YouTube and everything else, all the different options out there. I guess the long and the short of it is, I could say that I have 4 children, 23, 22, Kev's 22. I got an 18-year-old. I got a 14-year-old, and kids don't listen to the radio, for the most part. If you like music, you got Apple Music or Spotify or whatever. And if you talk, there's lots of things. I mean, what Jake and I are doing right now is the equivalent of a talk show. So, radio's under the gun. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of, they're trying to maintain everything, and it's just difficult. So it's just times change, things change. Newspapers were huge. It was the greatest deal ever. I like, my dad used to be like, Blair, newspapers are a great deal. Sure. It's a quarter, and look at everything that's in there, all the information, all the things you could read. It was very mentally stimulating for a quarter. But like my son and his era kids, they look at that as a wasted quarter. Right? Because you can get the same information online. But I don't know that you actually read it the same way online that you did when it was the actual newspaper copy.
There's like an analog. There's an analog. I mean, I got my start like with a college newspaper, covering like D3 sports, and there is like something special about putting out like a newspaper every week and being able to hold it in your hands and seeing what you messed up. And it is special. There's like a tactile quality that you miss, and the same with radio and the crackling. And and being in the car just alone with that. And I obviously got my start over there with those guys. So, I've been through it, and it's hard. It's a hard, weird time for media, and it's tough, but I'm glad they got to end it on that moment together.
Yeah, no question. And Tom wasn't the only one. I mean, my thoughts go out to John Lund, Tony Ryan, Lamont and Tonelli, and all the people at the Bone, and all the people that wound up losing their jobs. I've been there. I know what it's like. All I would say to any of them is don't panic. Think about what you've done, where the world is right now, media wise, where you think it's going, and persevere. And I have, and I know you guys can too. So anyway, hey, I appreciate it. And Jake, thanks for giving me that over the cap breakdown on Demo's contract. Thanks to everybody who jumped in. Thanks to Jake. Sorry that Dieter is ill. Hopefully, Dieter, you get better. Jake, I'll give you the final. By the way, everyone's worst nightmare says Lund gets no love. No, Lund was on today with Greg. He had his own send off. I'll say that, I'll say this. I didn't have a send off. You don't get a send off usually. Usually you get somebody's going to walk you to the parking lot and take your card key. So what you saw today was a classy move by Mike Holler and KMBR to give John and Greg a send off. And then I think tomorrow, or John and Tom a send off. And tomorrow, I think Lamont and Tonelli will probably have a send off on the Bone. So, anyway, these are all my friends, and it's a tough time, but we wish them well, and we just want to say it was really a pleasure working with every one of them. That's going to do it for us. Thanks to everybody, and thanks to all of you guys for jumping in and enjoying the stream tonight. I'm back streaming tomorrow morning from Levi's. I'll get up bright and early, 9 a.m. with Damon Bruce tomorrow morning, 10:45 with Chase Sr. tomorrow. And then I'll be back at Niners Nightly tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. And we have a writer coming on from Seattle to talk a little bit about the Niners and the Seahawks. So I'm looking forward to that. Join me tomorrow night at 6 o'clock on KMBR. And Jake, if people want to catch up with you, if people want to, catch everything that you're putting out there, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, follow us on Dieter and Hutch on YouTube. We're doing we do a post game show. We do a Tuesday breakdown, and then we do a Friday preview. So follow us there, and then you can follow me on Twitter or Blue Sky or wherever the hell everyone's going these days. I don't know. But yeah, follow Dieter and Hutch on YouTube, and got all our links there.
Thanks, Jake. You're the man. Thanks, everybody. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man